Hello again. This is the second in a series of transaxle videos. This video will be devoted to the 800, 801, and 820 series transaxles. Some of the more basic items which were covered in the 900 series transaxle video will not be covered in this video. That will allow for better continuity, save you time, and also make the video flow much better. Let's start out with the 800 series. Applications for the 800 series transaxle include riding mowers, lawn tractors, rear engine riders, and commercial mowers. This unit is not suited for ground engaging attachments. Features of this unit include automotive type bevel gears in the differential, a die-cast aluminum housing. The bearings are oil impregnated bushings with needle or ball bearings on axles, input and output shafts. All gears are heat treated for durability. There is an optional brake available on either side of the transaxle. There is a provision for a neutral start sensing switch. It has from 1 to 6 speeds forward and 1 reverse. You have an optional input location. We are using a 840A model for this demonstration. Other models would have the input in this location. You cannot switch the inputs. You must buy the correct model. There are additional options. You can have a steel differential, input bevel gear, and shift gear, or a 4-key, 4-keyway shifter brake shaft. The identification for this unit is found below the brake. Prior to disassembly, again be sure to clean the entire exterior of the unit, not forgetting the bolt hidden down into this crevice. Disassemble the unit in neutral. Remove the neutral start sensing switch and brake if applicable. Then remove the dedent set screw, spring, and ball. After you have the set screw removed, you can tip the unit over to get the ball and spring. After you have removed the detent, ball, and spring, you can then remove the rubber O-ring, which serves as a dust seal on the shift rod. This is not necessarily on all units. At this time, we can remove the cover bolts. Again, we'll use the fast method that we used in the 900 series. After you have the cover bolts all removed, you can then take off the cover. Place slight down pressure on the shift rod. Shift rod sometimes has a tendency to stick into the cover. We can then remove the shifting rod or fork. You want to check these locations to make sure there are no grooves worn from one detent location to the other. You also need to check these pins to make sure they are not worn or bent in any manner. We'll then take out the differential. Place the transaxle to the side, and I'll walk you through the disassembly of the differential. First of all, you'll want to drive out the roll pin, which is located in this spot. After you drive out the roll pin, you'll push the center rod through the 2 spider gears out in this manner. If you take it out in this manner, it will not catch on the grooves from the roll pin. After you have the center pin removed, you can then remove the 2 axles by taking off the snap rings. Now you'll notice we have serrated axles now, and we also use 2 snap rings rather than 1. If you have an older model which still has 1 snap ring, it would be a good idea to put on the 2 narrower snap rings. It'll give you better axle retention. Now I have one already disassembled, and I'll show it to you. Here we have the differential fully disassembled. First of all, we have the roll pin, which must be replaced on reassembly, the center drive pin, the 2 washers that go behind the 2 spider gears that go on to the center drive pin, the spider gears that go on to the axle ends, along with the washers that go on behind the spider gears, and the 2 snap rings which hold them in place. When removing these snap rings, do not stretch them out any farther than necessary to get over the serrated end. If you stretch them too far or twist them in any manner, you can damage them, and in that case, you should replace them. Again, to save time, I'm going to walk you through the reassembly. First, you'll want to take the longest of the two axles and put it into the differential housing. Then you'll put on the washer, the spider gear, and the two snap rings. Then do the same procedure with the other axle. When you have that completed, you can then take your spider gears for your center drive pin. You'll want to place one on top of the two spider gears to the axle, one on the bottom, then turn the axle until you line them up perfectly for inserting the drive pin. Take the drive pin, put it in from the opposite direction of the ring. That way it will not catch on anything. So as you're inserting it, you want to put it in this way, slide the washer behind the gear, slide it through the washer, through the gear, through the other washer, until it lines up so the new roll pin can be inserted. And that concludes assembling the differential. Let's move on to the rest of the unit now. We're using a dry unit for demonstration purposes. Out in the field, you will have bentonite grease in these units. Make sure that you clean all the bentonite grease off of the gears so that you can inspect them properly. There's a metal slug which acts as a dust seal on the end of the shifter brake shaft. Take that out and we can pick up our shifter brake shaft and counter shaft. Set those down, move our case out of the way so you can see better, and now we'll disassemble the shafts. The end of the shifter brake shaft, you have a rubber O-ring, which again serves as a dust seal. Then you have bronze oil light bushings on both ends of the shifter brake shaft and on the end of the counter shaft. Next to the output, we have a cage needle bearing with a square cut rubber O-ring. The square cut rubber O-ring keeps the grease on the needle bearings and keeps the bentonite grease out. Use some form of grease other than bentonite grease on cage needle bearings. We have a small washer on the one end of the shifter brake shaft. We have a large washer next to the output shaft. We can then take the large output gear off of the output pinion, and we can remove the output pinion itself. Now in the output pinion, you again have cage needle bearings. And there'll be a round rubber O-ring that again keeps the grease in on the cage needle bearings on both ends. Take off our spur gear. Then we'll have a spacer which makes up the difference of the output pinion gear. On the other end, we'll have a large flat washer here which closes up the windows of the shifter shaft. Have a small thrust washer on the end of the gears of the counter shaft. We can then take the gears off alternately, our spur gears and our shifting gears. Between the shifting gears, you will find a shifting washer, and we'll explain the direction of those shifting washers on reassembly. So I'll just take all of these off, putting our washers on one pile, our gears on another pile. As we're doing this, we're going to inspect all these gears for any wear or damage. After all the shifter gears have been removed, there'll be one more shifting washer which depresses the keys to go into the first gear. Now we can remove our large input gear. This input bevel gear, if you noticed, was on this way because we were doing a unit 840A model. If we do a unit with reverse input, this input bevel gear would be on in this direction. This time there's a small washer next to the reverse chain and sprocket, and then we can slide off the reverse chain and sprocket as a unit. Now we have separate shafts. The only thing remaining to do is to pull back on the shifting collar, which will come off with the shifting keys. The only part left to disassemble is the input shaft and gear. To disassemble this, you can either consult the 900 video or you can consult your mechanic's manual. We have gone through this in the past. One thing I'd like to remind you of is when you take off this snap ring, use the precautions that I gave you when we were in the differential section. Also, another good thing to remember is a snap ring usually has a round side and a flat side. Always put the flat side toward the thrust. We have made a recent change to the cover, which has added ribs and gussets to strengthen it, as you can see down here. And I wanted to point that out to you. I'll be back in a very short to show you the reassembly of the 800 series transaxle. To begin reassembly, we need to get our bentonite grease, part number 7880678. We're going to measure out 30 ounces of bentonite grease. We need the bentonite grease first so that we can pack it in the keyways and around the gears as we are assembling it. So we have our grease. Now we can begin reassembly. We'll start out with our shifter brake shaft. Again, we've checked these keyways to make sure there are no nicks, which will keep it from shifting properly. We will take one key, place it on top of the shifter brake shaft, take our shifting collar. We want the wide side or fat side to be inward. We'll place that onto our key. We'll take our other key, slide it up underneath, put it into the keyways, and slide it onto the shifter brake shaft. Now we can begin putting together our shifting gears. To start out with, we need a shifting washer. Again, these shifting washers have a rounded side and a square or flatter side with an indentation. We want the rounded side to be toward the keys, so it will depress the keys to go into the gear. Slide on our washer. Then we'll take our largest gear. In this case, the gear also has a flat side and an indented side. We want the flat side to go toward the washer. And we'll take another shifting washer, place that on again with the rounded side toward the keys. Take another gear, place that on again with the flat side toward the other washer. And we'll alternate back and forth, always putting on the washer with the rounded side toward the keys, and always putting on the gears with the flat side toward the keys. When we put on the last shifting gear, we're going to place on this washer, which is going to close up the windows on the shift gear so that the keys cannot slide all the way through the last gear. We'll put that down for a minute and we'll start building up the counter shaft. First of all, we'll take our large input bevel gear, put it on the counter shaft. In this model, it goes on in this direction, and then place on our spur gears. After we have all our spur gears in place, we'll put on a small thrust washer. Now we're going to put the two shafts together, and we're going to put on our reverse chain and sprocket. The reverse sprockets have a shouldered side and a flat side. Again, we want the shouldered side to be inward. On the 800 series, reverse is shifted into with the back end of the keys, which shift into this reverse sprocket. So we'll take our reverse chain, put on one sprocket, put in our other sprocket with the shoulder facing the same direction, and then we can slide them onto our two shafts. After we have those in place, we want to take a small washer, place it next to the reverse chain and sprocket so that it does not damage the rubber O-rings in the end of our output pinion. Now we can put our output pinion and output gear together as an assembly and then put them onto the shaft. If you look real closely, you'll notice there's a small chamfer on the inner diameter of the output gear. This side is more or less square cut. It assembles easier if you use the chamfered part and put that toward the output pinion. Now we can slide the assembly onto the shaft, making sure we keep our round O-rings in place. We'll then take the spacer and put that onto the shifter brake shaft. Put on our spur gear onto the shifter brake shaft. Might have to mesh the spur gear, the output gear. Can then put a small thrust washer on the shifter brake shaft. Put our large washer next to the output gear. Then we can put our cage needle bearing with square cut O-ring on the end of the output. We can put our bronze oil light bushing. Again, we have the little ear. We want to put that ear facing upward so that we can turn it down into the case when placed into the case. We have one more bushing to put on the other end of the counter shaft, again with the ear up. One to put on the opposite end of the shifter brake shaft with the ear up. And then we can put on our small O-ring or dust seal on our shifter brake shaft. We're now ready to put it into the case. Bring our case forward. We'll just pick up the entire assembly and drop it into the case. We can now turn the bushing so that the ear is down into the recessed area of the case. Forward on the counter shaft, backward on both sides of the shifter brake shaft. We can then take our differential. You will notice there is also an ear on this bushing and a small ear on the other side. We place this into the transaxle, lining up our bearings, and we'll take the ear, turn it back into the recess. Like this one, turn it down into the recess. We can then take our dust seal, place that on the end of the shifter brake shaft. Take our shift fan, place some bentonite grease on the top of the shift fan. Now we'll put in the remainder of bentonite grease, and then we can put on the cover. Guiding it over the shift rod and down into place. Now after we have it in place, we'll check to see if it rocks in any manner. If it is rocking, it means that something was not assembled properly. Take off the cover immediately. No need to put in the screws because all we would do is bind up the unit. We have this in place, we can start putting in our cover screws, replace our brake if applicable, replace our neutral start sensing switch if applicable. After we have the cover screws all turned down, we're going to take a torque wrench, make sure that we torque these bolts 90 to 100 inch-pounds, then take our D-dent, ball, spring, and set screw and turn them into the case 2 turns past flush. And that will conclude the assembly of the 800 series transaxle. In this portion of the program, we would like to introduce you to the 801 series transaxle. The 801 series transaxle is quite similar to the 800 series. However, we'd like to spend a few minutes to point out the differences. The 801 series transaxle is very similar to the 800 series. The 801 can use a self-powered tiller for application purposes. There are feature differences, however. Let's remove the cover. We'll put down pressure on the shift rod. Take out the shifting fan so you can see a little better. The first difference is we use 36 ounces of bentonite grease in the 801. We have ball bearings on the axle supports as standard features, as well as on the counter shaft. We have a steel-cut input bevel gear. We have steel-cut bevel gears in the differential. We have a high impact ring gear, all is standard equipment. On the cover, we have an increased capacity needle bearing on the input. There's a thrust bearing package on the input bevel pinion, which is a thrust washer, a thrust bearing, and another thrust washer. We have a 4-keyway shifter brake shaft, and as an additional option, we have steel cut shifter and counter shaft gears. As far as assembly and disassembly of the 801, you can use the same procedure used in the 800. Why don't we move right along and go into the 820 series transaxle? The 820 series is the newest in the line of Peerless transaxles. The 820 series is the workhorse, the heavy-duty unit that can handle commercial applications. It can handle ground engaging equipment such as the tiller, dirt blade, plow, or harrow. Let's look at some of the external features of the 820. First, we have heavy-duty, larger cover bolts. We have a larger brake disc, which again can be mounted on either side of the unit. We have a 3/4 inch input shaft, which could be in this location or, dependent upon model, would be moved over in this location, giving you the opposite direction. We have a 1-inch axle. We still have the provision for a neutral start sensing switch. I'll remove the detent ball spring and set screw, the cover bolts, and the brake, and we'll look at the internal portion of this transaxle. The identification for this unit can be found in the front of the unit in this area. After the cover bolts have been removed, we can lift off the cover. First, I'd like to point out that we now have a ball bearing around the input shaft. The housing itself is thicker. The walls are 3/16 of an inch thick. The differential is heavy duty with steel cut bevel gears. We have sleeve needle bearings next to the differential, and we have ball bearings on the axle ends. Let me remove the shift fan so we can see a little better. The gears throughout the unit are steel cut. We have what is sometimes called a fully jeweled unit. There are sleeve needle bearings on the end of all shafts. There's a bearing cap in the center to add stability to that area. We have a 4-keyway shifter brake shaft. All of these features are standard in the 820 series. Let's remove the differential, and we'll show you how to tear it apart. What you need to do is to place it in a soft jaw vise and remove all of the hex head bolts. I'll remove these bolts, and then we'll show you the breakdown of the differential. After you removed all of the hex head bolts, we can take the carriers off of the center ring gear. Now when you look at the ring gear, you'll notice there's a relief cut onto this ring gear. Make sure on reassembly that this relief is toward the side that has the bolt heads. Otherwise, you will not be able to assemble it. We can now break this apart, take off the carrier from both sides, and take apart our ring gear. Inside the ring gear, we'll have 2 bevel gears and 2 drive blocks, and of course our drive pin. Now we want to check these bevel gears, we want to check our ring gear, and we also want to check the bevel gears on the axle ends. Again, you'll take your snap ring pliers, remove the snap ring, and you'll be able to slide it off. Inspect all of these areas for axle wear or any damage to the bevel gears. When you put the snap rings back on, make sure that you put the flat side of the snap ring toward the thrust. That'll keep it from expanding and popping off the end of the axle. We'll put this to the side, and we'll move into the rest of the unit. First of all, we need to take off our bearing cap. So bear with me while I remove the 2 bolts. After the bearing cap has been removed, we can take out the shafts. The output shaft is separate by itself, and then we can pick up the shifter brake shaft and counter shaft. They will stick into the case at times. We'll put the case to the side, and we'll start the disassembly of the shafts. The output shaft has a sleeve needle bearing on each end. Inside of the sleeve needle bearing, there's a square cut O-ring. Find a large washer on each end. And then we can remove the output gear from the output pinion. The output pinion is directly onto the output shaft. This is quite similar to the 920 or 900 series. Let's do the counter shaft and shifter brake shaft. First of all, we'll remove again these sleeve needle bearings. These will have a round O-ring, keeping the grease on the needle bearing. Now, it's a good idea to keep these in some area where you won't confuse them, because they will fit on either shaft. If you do have a problem, you'll notice that the one for the counter shaft is a little bit wider, and that may help you. Turn it this way, remove the one off the other end of the shifter brake shaft with the O-rings, and the one off of the counter shaft. I'll turn it this way so you get a little better view of the counter shaft. On this end of the counter shaft, we'll have a thrust sandwich, which is a thrust washer, a thrust bearing, and a thrust washer. On the other end, we'll have a washer that acts as a spacer. Now, that's because of the direction of this unit. In other models, where the input bevel gear is turned 180 degrees, we would find this thrust sandwich on this end of the shaft and this washer on this end of the counter shaft. Set that to the side. On the end of the shifter brake shaft, we'll have a small thrust washer. It will come off of there. There we go. And a spur gear. Now we can remove all of our shifting gears and gears on our counter shaft. First, we'll have a large washer that closes up the windows on the end of the shifter brake shaft. And now we can take the gears off alternately and stack them up. Put our counter shaft gears on one pile, put our shifting gears on another pile, and in between the shifting gears, we will have our shifting washers. We'll start a pile of those. So I'll just take these all off. Bring them all together. After we have all the spur gears and shifting gears removed, we'll find a thrust washer next to the input bevel gear. Then we can take off our input bevel gear, pull our counter shaft out of our reverse sprocket. We can pull on our shifting collar and pull our keys through the neutral spacers. Set those to the side. Take our reverse chain and sprocket, slide that off and set it to the side, and then slide our keys through the shaft, take off our collar and all of our keys. And that concludes disassembly of the 820. I'll rearrange this a little bit so it'll be a little easier for you to follow on reassembly. We begin reassembly with our bentonite grease, part number 788067A. We'll measure out 36 ounces for the 820 unit. We'll take our bentonite grease and we'll place some in our keyways and also pack our gears as we are assembling it. Before placing the grease in the keyway, be sure to inspect them that there aren't any nicks or anything that'll keep the keys from shifting properly. Then to begin reassembly, we'll take one key, place it on top of the shaft, take our shifting collar. In this case, it does not matter how the shifting collar goes on because it's the same width on each side. Take another key, slide it underneath into our shifting collar, holding them in place. Take another key to the side, slide that in, turn this a little so you can see. Take our last key, place that on the top, and then slide it back on, being careful that you do not cut yourself on the keyways. Then we can take our reverse sprockets. Now, on the sprockets, you will notice that there is one side that is collared, and the other side that is a little more flat. We want the larger collared side to be facing in the same direction and away from the keys. So we'll put our sprockets into our chain, with our collars facing in the same direction, and we'll slide it onto the shaft with the collar away from the keys. We can then take our neutral spacers. Now you'll notice there's a narrower spacer and a wider spacer. You will also notice that one side has a larger inner diameter than the other side. Now when we're putting these together, what we're going to want to do is we want the two larger inner diameters facing one another. We also want to begin with the narrower spacer going toward the keys, because on the narrower spacer, you will notice there's a chamfer on the inside, which will allow it to shift into the neutral spacer easier. So we'll put the two large IDs together, put the narrowest of the two spacers toward the keys, and slide it onto the shaft. Then we'll take the keys and force them into our neutral spacers. They go all the way through, we'll just pull it right back. Now we can start building up the two shafts. We'll take our counter shaft, slide that into our reverse sprocket. Then we'll take our large input bevel gear, slide that onto our counter shaft. We're putting it on in this direction because this is the direction of this model. There are some models where it will be turned 180 degrees, as I mentioned earlier. Take a small thrust washer, put it next to our large input bevel gear, and then we can start on the shifter brake shaft. We start out with the largest gear. There's a flat side to this gear and an indented side to the gear. We want the flat side of the gear to face toward the keys. Now on an 820, we do not need to start with a washer because the neutral spacer will depress the keys to go into the first gear. So we'll put on our largest gear, and we'll put on the smallest spur gear on our counter shaft. Now we need to place on a shifting washer. Again, we're going to want the rounded or chamfered side to go toward the keys to depress them. Put that in place, put on our next shifting gear with the flat side toward the keys, on our next spur gear, alternate back and forth, put on our washer with the chamfer toward the keys, put on the gear with the flat toward the keys, put on a washer with the chamfer toward, put on a gear with the flat toward, all toward the keys. Keep building up our counter shaft. After we have all the shifting gears in place, all the counter shaft gears in place, we want to place a flat washer on the end of the shifter brake shaft to close up the windows. And on the end of the counter shaft, we are going to put our spacer washer. Now again, that's because of the direction of this model. In some models, you will find your thrust sandwich in this location. Place that on the end. And we can put on our two sleeve needle bearings. Place one on the shifter brake shaft, which is the wider of the two, and place the narrower of the two on the counter shaft. Now we'll turn this so you can see the other end. Take our thrust bearing, sandwich it between two thrust washers, place it on the end of the counter shaft. Then take our sleeve needle bearing, put that on the end of the counter shaft. Then on the shifter brake shaft, we want to take our spur gear, slide that onto the splined area of the shifter brake shaft, put on our rust washer, and our last sleeve needle bearing, making sure we keep the round rubber O-rings in place on the end of the bearings. We can then take our output pinion and shaft and place that into our output gear. Now on the output gear, you'll notice one side has a larger inner diameter chamfer than the other. Usually makes it easier if you take the larger chamfer, put that toward the pinion to slide it on. Then put a large washer on each end and our sleeved needle bearings. As you put these on, you'll sometimes get an air pocket. So when you're putting it into the case, what you want to do is squeeze together on them to hold them together, and it'll go into the case easier. We'll take the shifter brake shaft and counter shaft, set them into the case, making sure we put some pressure on the ends of our shafts so that we put in our sleeve needle bearings. Then take our output shaft, put that in, and then take our bearing cap, start our bolts, turn down our bolts. After we have our bolts turned down, we want to get our torque wrench and torque both of these bolts at 90 to 100 inch-pounds. We can then take our differential, set that into our case, making sure we have our ball bearings in place. Take our shift fan, inspect it to make sure it's not damaged, make sure our pins are good. Place our pins into the slot in the shifting collar and down into the case. We can then put some bentonite grease on top of here, put the rest of the bentonite grease that we have left inside, take our cover, guide it over the shift rod, make sure that it doesn't rock. At this point, we're ready to put in all of our cover bolts. Now to save time, I'm not going to gun these all down. But after you'd gun them all down, you'd again take out your torque wrench, torque them 190 to 200 inch-pounds, then replace your neutral start sensing switch if applicable, your brake if applicable, and then put in your detent, ball, spring, and set screw. Turn the set screw down until it's flush with the cover. And that'll complete assembling the 820 series transaxle.
Tecumseh is constantly developing new and innovative ideas in the way of training to assist you in keeping up to date on Tecumseh engines and transaxles. One popular method of improving your technical skills is to attend our service school in Grafton, Wisconsin. Here, technicians can take advantage of the latest training available and are brought up to speed by working on Tecumseh engines and transaxles of both early and late model designs. Basic and advanced courses are available and run throughout the fall, winter, and spring seasons. Technicians are awarded certificates of achievement, certifying the fact that they have received factory-authorized service training, thus putting these achievers one additional step ahead of their competition. Tecumseh also realizes that not everyone can attend the service school, so we have made available many training aids to assist you in making your job easier. All of our training aids are listed in a special training aids brochure, service number 692-798. Order a copy and take advantage of the many aids available to you. Another part of Tecumseh's effort to provide you with the latest and most effective product information is Tecumseh's service support literature and service training videotapes. Obtaining this up-to-date information is as easy as ordering a spare part. Tecumseh has current video training programs covering troubleshooting Tecumseh carburetors, service number 695-015. Understanding Tecumseh ignition systems, service number 695-059. Disassembly and assembly of Tecumseh Peerless 900, 920, and 910 transaxles. Service number 695, 148. Disassembly and assembly of Tecumseh Peerless 800, 801, and 820 transaxles. Service number 695, 285. And electrical troubleshooting. Service number 695, 185. These Tecumseh-produced training videos are hands-on, how-to-do-it programs. The programs feature the knowledge and experience of Tecumseh's service school instructors. The instructors deliver first-hand technical knowledge and many innovative service tips gained through years of experience. Tecumseh's Factory Service School, video programs, and product support literature are excellent examples of how Tecumseh continues to provide the latest information to you today.